We will welcome now Aleksandra PAWLIKOWSKA-GWIAZDA. Sorry if I, with my name, I can't do that. It's all my life that everybody call me Gerson and stop with my name. So sorry if I did a mistake.
Don't worry, I may mistake myself sometimes.
Okay. So Aleksandra is a PhD student in the archaeology at the University of Warsaw. Current research material culture of monks in the Western Thebes is realized under the supervision of Professor Thomas Deir, head of the Department of Papyrology in Warsaw University, within the framework of the project Monks and Monastic Communities in the Eastern Mediterranean for 8 centuries, carried out by Professor Eva Wisciska. Thank you very much for your talk. That will be today, woodwork in the Monastery of St. Phoibammon in the Western Thebes in Upper Egypt. Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. Let me share my screen. Is it visible?
It's coming, I think, in few. Yeah.
Okay. Now. Is it enlarged right now?
Now, yes, it's okay.
Okay, great. I think the connection is a little bit slow, but I think we can manage somehow. So thank you very much for being here, for accepting my presentation. And as it was said before, the aim of this speech is to present a part of my almost finished PhD dissertation entitled The Material Culture of Monks in Western Thebes from 4th to 10th century AD. Region of Western Thebes discussed here was and still is a truly remarkable area. It was used and reused for centuries. Around 5th century AD, monks started to inhabit old pharaonic tombs and temples, creating hermitages, loras, and monasteries. The history of the monastery Phoibammon begins more or less in the same period. It is widely believed that at first, this congregation was located far in the desert on the southern ends of Phoibammon mountain, but due to undoubtedly harsh environmental conditions, it was moved further north. Eventually, its founder, Abraham, the Bishop of Hermonthis, built the new monastery within the Upper Terrace of the Temple of Hatshepsut around the end of 6th century AD. And here we have the very famous icon representing the Bishop Abraham itself, which is now kept in the collection of the National Museum in Berlin. Here is the reconstructed plan of the whole complex itself. What I want to point out that the most sacred part of the monastery was located in the southern part, where the monastic church was established inside the chapel, the previous chapel of the of Hatshepsut, which is marked with the letters CHR here. Among the variety of finds, that were discovered during a Polish-Egyptian archaeological expedition, there is a fair amount of wooden objects. The archaeological context of these finds was largely disturbed by earlier excavations carried out in 19th and 20th century, so we are unfortunately unable to link them with any particular room in the monastery. Wooden objects dated to the late Roman Byzantine period as an individual category clearly represented in the Theban region, because only on 14 sites their presence was confirmed. As contrast, pottery is present on more than 19% of 226 collected sites in my database, because this is the map which I prepared with my colleague geologists for the purpose of my dissertation. Nevertheless, and those wooden artifacts, which I am going to discuss right now, are a typical example of craftsmanship known from other monastic sites in Egypt and beyond. Assemblage of crosses presents a different, various stylistic repertoire. The most elaborate one was a cross in the shape of a typical cross paté. It was discovered it was covered with a thin layer of leather, which was attached to the wooden surface on the front and on all sides with the glutin glue, which was obviously confirmed by the work of our conservator. Leather was then painted using at least 5 colors: black, white, red, gray, and pink. The iconography can be recognized as a krug-schemata, geometric figures imitating different jewels. There is also a row of small circles in the middle made with an iron punch tool here. In the upper part, there is a medallion within which we can see traces of a human figure. After a closer examination and looking at some other parallels, obviously, some traces of purse and cruciform halo can be recognized, thus suggesting that the human figure in question is Christ. Cruciform halo was reserved mostly for the members of the Holy Trinity. And the lower part of the cross has a symmetric ornament, as it is shown here on this reconstruction. What we can also notice is that there is a handle at the bottom, which is a typical addition to processional process used during religious celebrations. The second cross was made using the same technique. Thin leather was attached to the board using glutin glue. According to our conservator, there are also clear traces of a hand sew on the sides. In the upper part, there is a small perforation which was made prior to covering it with leather. Contrary to the previous example, this one could have been hanged on the wall. Yet iconography is very similar. Krug-schemata with the additional medallion encircling a human figure. Taking into account that only the lower part of the tunic is preserved, which can be seen here, obviously, it was not possible to establish the identity of the figure. We can, of course, expect that it was originally a depiction of a holy personage. Usually, Christ was adorned by 4 figures of Apocalypse, as we know, for example, from the painting preserved in the throne hall in Old Dongola, dated to 9th century AD. Christ could also be accompanied by evangelists, prophets, or the most famous intercessors such as Virgin Mary or John the Baptist. Looking at these and other parallels may help making some further reconstructions. The third cross is a typical example of krug-schemata. The ornament was painted directly on the wooden surface using at least 3 colors: black, pink, and white. Literally, the closest analogy comes from the neighboring site in Jabal Naga, where inside the tomb TT 157, rearranged later by a monk, fragment of a painted wooden cross was also found. Other crosses are rather less elaborate. There are plain with only cuts filled with black paint. Comparable cross is kept in the British Museum, although it was also embellished with bone inlays. The majority of wooden objects unearthed during excavation can be recognized as screen elements that once separated sanctuary from naos. Apart from balusters, which are obviously also common for different kinds of furniture, and apart from decorative joints, a significant amount of irregular hexagons could have been distinguished. They were sometimes nailed to another wooden panel with a hand-forged nail or a small wooden peg. Each hexagon has 3 incised parallel lines. Their surface is often painted in red, white, green, and yellow using encaustic painting technique. Identical wooden pieces were identified by Herbert Winlock, working nearby in the so-called Topos of Epiphanios, located on the northern slope of the Sheikh Abdul Gurna in Western Thebes. If put together like a puzzle, they create a decorative lattice work characteristic for mashrabiyas. And here we have an example from the monastery in Syria, which was founded in 5th century AD, although it is a still functioning monastery. And of course, I'm aware that this screen is a modern one, but it was made on the basis of the documentation showing the previous screen, which was unfortunately lost during the fire. In the monastic context, it could have been originally a part of the screen that was undeniably installed between the northern and the southern wall of the Chapel of Hatshepsut. That is a later church. Both of these walls bear traces of later cuts executed on the same level. We have one cut here and one cut here. Considering some other artifacts from the el-Bahari, such as the small columns with vertical rectangular grooves, as shown here, we start to have an idea how this screen might have looked like. Oh, of course, I am aware that we have thousands of other possibilities, but this is one that can be taken under consideration. Another group of wooden objects can be categorized as carved panels. Faunal and floral motifs were often subjects both in pagan and Christian art. Palmets, vines, lotus flowers, animals were carved on friezes decorating screens, doors, cupboards, chests, or other kinds of furnishing. Moving towards a different aspect of monastic living, here are some weaving tools, several versions of shuttles. Weaving was one of the most popular activity among the monastic communities. Well known from Ostraka dossier, monk Frange, inhabitant of the tomb TT29, was specializing in weaving mummy bands. Numerous lumpits discovered in situ around Western Thebes are yet another proof that making textiles was an important part of monks' life. One shuttle, presented here, has a linen yarn still wrapped around it. Linen yarns and ready-use products like aforementioned mummy tapes were both found in the el-Bahari. Thus, there is no doubt that monks from the Monastery of St. Phoibammon were also spending a lot of their time weaving. Interesting, though poorly preserved, is a group of inscribed wood. 4 of them may be interpreted as pieces of panels. They also resemble tomb markers, such as the one found in Hawara. Unfortunately, only single letters can be recognized, but we may suspect the presence of names or titles like Upper Victor, Upper Phoibammon. The object on the right is a diptych, a wooden writing tablet with an almost illegible text written in black ink. The text itself is still obscure, but the assumption that this could be a school tablet is not too far-fetched. We should bear in mind that the end of its function, this place was a home for sickly children who were donated by their parents to the monastery. Wooden panels are known from the topos of Epiphanius, but instead of being used as school tablets for exercises, they were covered with passages from the Bible. In order to establish the real purpose of this artifact, we must have wait for the final translation of its text. And last but not least, varia, a group that constitutes of many pieces that are often hard to be identified. It comes as no surprise, though, that a significant amount of wooden objects, not shown here, is heavily broken and eroded, excluding any plausible identification. Easily recognizable one is a kump, which has been already showed and discussed by other speakers. Fragments of a thin painted slats made of palm wood may be coming from a box or a chest, for example. I mean the slats which are shown in the upper part of the picture. Unfortunately, no special analysis was conducted so far regarding the type of wood used in above presented object. I have mentioned only palm wood, which is quite easy to be distinguished. This is a perspective for further research. From other monastic contexts on Western Thebes, we know that tamarisk or acacia wood was confirmed. Nonetheless, our knowledge about monastic workshops or carpentry are also very limited in Western Thebes. What we can learn from textual sources is that monks were rather seeking carpenters outside among laymen. We have hardly any accounts on monks specializing in carpentry. For certain, it must have been a complicated job demanding the use of special equipment and tools. The humble interiors of hermitages were probably not suited for such tasks. Nevertheless, at least some of it might have been done by the monks in situ, such as painting crosses or covering it with leather. especially that I was able to confirm leather production in situ in the monastery of Phoibammon during my last work in with the Polish archaeological expedition. Summing up, what is evident is the high need for wooden objects of religious or votive character and all others which could have embellished the monastery interiors. Thank you very much.
Thank you.